Public opinion is very important to the social problems process. One can argue that a social problem exists only once it is collectively recognized as a problem by the public. Additionally, our democratic government allows public opinion to be the driving force for policy change, which is how social problems can often be remedied. One thing that I think is important to understand with regards to Proposition 13 is that there was a special set of circumstances that led to such strong opposition to property taxes in California and the strong public support for Proposition 13 in 1978. Californians did not always mind paying property taxes. There was a you get what you pay for kind of attitude toward them. When it was these property taxes that was paying for local school programs and other infrastructure. However, between 1972 and 1978, a large swing in opinion occurred that resulted from several factors. For one, there was the Serrano v. Priest Supreme Court decisions, which called for equal funding as the goal for public schools, and this led to legislation that would disconnect increases in local property tax with increase in revenue for the local schools. When people saw what they paid in taxes did not directly benefit them, they were not as enthused about those taxes. Pre-Prop 13 was also a period of rapid inflation, especially because of the booming housing market. When housing prices doubled, so did property taxes. And while property taxes doubled, services did not. The government was sitting on a large surplus. We must also consider that 1978 was right after Vietnam and Watergate, so the people's trust in the government was also very low. Californians were especially not pleased when the legislature failed to respond to the public's growing dismay with property taxes. This resulted in the tax revolt that gave birth to Proposition 13. Public opinion, I looked at opinion polls about this issue that were taken in the very beginning of this proposition's introduction to the public, and also general opinion polls regarding tax. Polls that I looked at explained how they would maintain the highest accuracy in representing the true opinion of the public. For example, a large sample of people would be a good thing to get to make sure your opinion poll is accurate. And then also making sure you have representation from areas all over California representing both parties. And then also making sure the amount of representation you have reflects the actual state proportions of Republicans versus Democrats or what have you. Although public opinion polls have some good insight, there are difficulties in ensuring accuracy and accounting for all variables. An even better measurement of public opinion are the actual votes. The outcome in voting in the polls, which actually make the decision on tax laws, are made up of a huge population. And it is most likely that they are the population you are trying to find out about, since they are the ones voting and creating or stopping policy change. So looking at how people voted with regard to all tax propositions will give you a better idea about what they think about a specific tax proposition. However, those that vote still might not represent the entire population that will reap the effect. We don't get to find out about the people who will not be old enough to vote at the next poll, and people who are the least apathetic might be skewed toward the Republican Party or people that are older. Another place where you can find detail about public opinion is by spokespeople for opinion. You can listen to opinion writers or opinion people in the news, people who have their talk shows that are about political opinion, and the large audiences will listen to those portraying their opinion. So when somebody has a large audience listening to them, you can look at the demographic for who watches their show or reads their news blogs or whatever they're doing, and figure that those types of people will have a similar opinion to what that person is voicing. In general, tax is unpopular. It's an expense people aim to skillfully avoid. And one way we can examine the American view on taxing is to listen to the most famously repeated quotes or jokes. For example, Calvin Coolidge, he said, "Collecting more taxes than is absolutely necessary is legalized robbery." And I think that might be what people pre-Proposition 13 were feeling like. They saw that there was a huge budget surplus, and yet they were still having the same taxes as always. J. Paul Getty said, "If you get up early, work late, and pay your taxes, you will get ahead if you strike oil." So this shows how people might see taxes as un-American, blaming taxes for, inhibiting them from being able to achieve their American dream or social mobility. They're trying to get ahead, but then they have their taxes. Franklin D. Roosevelt said, "Taxes, after all, are the dues we pay for the privileges of a membership in an organized society." And that is a more positive view on taxes, and you could maybe look at that as how the Californian people were feeling when they saw their taxes going to good use before Proposition 13 passed, when they were able to see how their taxes were affecting their community at home. That's maybe how they felt about taxes then. Robert Half said, "People try to live within their incomes so they can afford to pay taxes to a government that can't live within its income. This shows the irony of fiscal responsibility expected by individuals versus the government." So people say, well, the government can't live within its means, and yet I still have to try and live within my means to pay for government services that maybe I'm not even using. So that's another example of public opinion. And even though taxes are unpopular, government cuts aren't necessarily very popular either. Although people sometimes might favor cuts in programs because they believe the government is becoming too large, and or they do not feel the government should be the facilitator of a program, public services and programs are not opposed to in general. Everybody has a different program they value most. It's true, and this can be part of the problem, not that certain government programs are valued, but that people might not care about cuts for a particular government service that does not specifically help them. If a citizen sees they are paying taxes for services they do not use, naturally they are not welcoming of such taxes. Now, public opinion about taxes definitely varies among parties. An opinion writer from City Journal does a good job of explaining Republican and Democratic views on Proposition 13. He says in good times, Republicans won't want to raise business taxes or other taxes, but the public wants a modified welfare state, excellent schools, a clean environment, low college tuitions, but it's not willing to pay for them. Getting back to the differences between public opinion between Democrats and Republicans, the City Journal writer says that the left also blames Proposition 13 for much of what it thinks has gone wrong with American political life in general over the past 3 decades, especially with fiscal problems. The Republicans don't want to grow the government and government services. They would rather limit government spending. When looking at public opinion about Proposition 13 just before it was passed, it was found that 62% of people would vote for Prop 13 because they were fed up with high property taxes and wanted to force the government to do something about it. So it's important to know why it was passed in the first place, and that it really had to do with home property taxes. Overall, it remains a stable statement to say that tax increases as a whole remain unpopular with the public. The most popular folklore illustrates that well. However, if given the choice to raise someone's taxes, making businesses pay more instead of families is normally accepted. Even though Californians are willing to cut taxes, they are not as opinionated for cutting spending on public services. Finding the public services that people strongly oppose cutting to may be key in promoting a little tax reformation.